I'm very honored to come back to SVA to present my work. I'm going to start to briefly introduce myself again. I'm born and raised in Shanghai. I studied a little art in China, mainly painting, design. I started to do some artwork in a very young age. My mother sent me to a weekend art school. So throughout my childhood, I never had a weekend. It's always spending time painting and drawing. One art school to another art school. I think a lot of Chinese audience can relate that. But I never really understand photography. I never touched the camera before 2000, I guess. So. But I work in the advertising for not a long time, for 2-3 years in Shanghai, and I started to get to know people from outside China, and many of them gave me a lot of resources to look at Western art, and that was that was around late 90s, and I worked for McCann Erickson for a short period for commission work, and I get to know a lot of artists from New York, and they encouraged me to advance my education in the States. So in 2000, I came to the United States. I went to Minneapolis College of Art Design. Over there, I started my first photography course. I never imagined being a photographer for 23 years living in China. And all of a sudden, I discovered this new media. It was really, I think I've become a photographer based on my instinct. I did not know what should I do after going to a photo major, or I know nothing about it. I just go for it and started to taking pictures. So after 2.5 years studying in Minneapolis, I moved to New York and I went to SVA, started my graduate school study. So I started this, I would say, my first large project, which is called Almost Naked. I'm going to show you just a few pictures of the project. I started this project around 2004 in SVA. I decided to spend all my graduate school doing one project. So this is the one project I did. I was very shy at the time. I did not know much about communicating with other people. So I thought maybe I should kind of break down, push a little, get to know people. So I started to posing some ads on Craigslist, and this is actually one person I got from Craigslist, but that was in 2004. Craigslist, it was still relatively new thing, and people are still kind of trusting other people, posing ads, photographers, want to make pictures, students. So I met this guy in his hotel, downtown New York. It was, I would say, it was most strange photo shoot I ever had. It was a very quiet session. I go in, and in a very early morning, I think he just had a shower. If you see the prints, you actually can see there's water drips in his body. So we had a very brief conversation. I said, well, I would like to take a picture of you. And, it's a small hotel room. I said, anywhere you want to sit. So he sat down, and it was only 15 minutes. I shot about 2 rows, completely in quietness. We didn't talk much. But it was that moment, he was looking outside. I just felt a very heartfelt moment. I love this picture. One of my favorite pictures for the project. This is actually a later picture for the project in 2007. I met this guy in the subway, and I was fascinated of his hair. So, and he looks like a student. At the time, I would say I started project in 2004, and I went through graduate school in 2006, and I also continued working on the project for another 3 years until 2009, late 2009. So this picture is around 2007. I'm already get used to approaching people. So I started approach people online because I was very shy. I don't know what to talk to them in person. But by 2007, I'm already very good at just go up to people and say, you know, I want to take a picture of you. Would you mind? So this is the guy. Actually, I think he was an NYU student, and he was very open about modeling for me. So I went to his apartment. I normally photograph people in their own environment. I think it's very comfortable then, at least. And I also have this enormous curiosity of other people's space. I think that probably do something about my upbringing in China, that privacy is such a mysterious thing. You know, you never go to other people's bedroom, and you don't talk about certain things. So making this project is my excuse to move into other people's world. It's the same with this woman. Actually, I met her through a friend who is a dance teacher, and she lives in New Jersey, and I went over there. We spent at least 5 hours in her house. She tried on every single dress she had. She's an amazing woman. She's a math teacher in the college, but she loves dance, any kind of jazz and belly dance in this case, and she modeled every single dress, and I was really thrilled to see an old age woman very enthusiastic about life. The funny thing is, after I sent this particular picture to her, she was not happy about the image. I think being a portrait photographer, especially doing work like this, I often go to people without telling them the purpose of the project. I like to start this blankness before a photo session, so they don't know me much, I don't know him or her much, and we're just starting to create this relationship in a matter of a couple hours. So I think she was imagining something like a Vogue magazine spread, a fashion photography type. So she was a little upset about the picture. She thought it was not best way to present her. But eventually I wrote a very long email to convince her, because I actually do have a modeling release for every model, but I do also respect everyone's opinion whether they wanted the picture to show in public. So I wrote a long email to her to explain my work, to explain how beautiful she is, and she came to one of my exhibitions, and actually heard people talk about how beautiful she is, and she was finally convinced after a few years of the picture. So, and a lot of people don't know this is a couple picture, but this is actually two people in it. People always comment on my couple picture that where the man, woman, the man, they always seem disconnected, which you will see later. Later, there's quite a few couple pictures. This is one of my last portrait for the Almost Naked series, and I'm starting moving to a different direction. In early on, I actually like this picture was photographed in 2005, so quite beginning, early stage. I was very interested in costumes, what they wear, and I'm interested in the environment. But at the end of the project, I started to make a simpler image. My portraits starting to have less and less background. I decided I really wanted people to focus on that person I'm photographing instead of come up with this conclusion. In a way, I don't know what to judge, maybe think about this person based on the environment. So I started to make these very simple portraits of people without any, background or objects around them. So after the Almost Naked series, I started thinking about my next project. It was quite obvious reason to do something about China. I'm from China, and I had at the time I already lived in the U.S. for a long time, and it was a period that China become such a popular subject. Every magazine, newspaper, television, something about China is there. Most time, I think it's a very stereotype Chinese image, and also at the time, I think in the photography world, China become this popular subject. A lot of Western photographer and the Chinese photographer starting photograph very big city in China, skyscrapers, factories. But I at the time I think, well, yes, that is the current image of China, but it's also a very small part of China. China is so big, we cannot just focus on the new and the modern side. What about the traditional side? What about the side that really connects to people? I would say most people in China don't live in the skyscrapers, and they don't work in a factory, and so they just kind of have this normal life like everywhere else. So I decided to make a project about that kind of Chinese life, which actually I grew up with. I grew up in shanty town in Shanghai. It's very interesting community because everybody know each other, and in the summer we, eat outside, we sleep outside. It's kind of this sweet memory you can't find anymore in current days in Shanghai. So in 2008, for the first time, I went back to China as a photographer. And I think after 5 years of education as an artist, I was looking at China in a completely different perspective. The first trip was very emotional because I did see enormous change in China, somewhat not expected. I know how much change is in China when I was living in the United States, but until you really see your own eye, especially I am from China, it's quite shocking. Everything, my family has changed, my home is moved, the old neighborhood is already demolished. I just felt this big disconnection to Shanghai. So I packed up and I just randomly go to a different city. So this is one of the city I went. This is Xi'an, a very popular city, historical, very touristy. But I did not know where to go, but I always go to the water side. I'm just kind of water person. I like rivers and lakes. So I discovered this park is a duplicate of Tang Dynasty summer vacation garden for the royalty. And it was raining that day. There was nobody in the park. I was the only one there, and I was just wandering around, pretending I'm the king. It was fascinating because you can really go in any room. Nobody is there, and I saw this swan is there. At that moment, I discovered what I really want to photograph. I mean, that kind of sentimental side of China. It's like a Tang Dynasty literature, poetry, where the essential of life, where the beauty of life is essential. Nobody thinking about anything. And the poetry, the writers, the artists, they drink wine and they go to the Yellow Mountain and look at the scenery, and that's kind of a fantasy life I'm always dreaming about. So that this is really the image for Chinese sentiment. Portrait come up later. Most of the portrait actually was shot in Shanghai. Photograph people in Shanghai, in China, is quite different experience than photographing them in New York or Europe. I think most people are pretty conservative, especially nudities. This is literally the first portrait I made in China. Is in Shanghai, as you see the big skyscraper in the back. It was my first test to see how far a Chinese person can go. As soon as I say, take your shirt off, and he was in a state of shock. But I learned how to react that kind of shock. So, and I tend to photograph younger people, just to see what the younger generation live, what they look like in China. Like I said, I feel this disconnection from Shanghai, but this is actually Shanghai. This is the only only landscape, cityscape I made in Shanghai. I have a special feeling to it because that's the Suzhou River where I grew up nearby. Obviously, this is in 2008. It looked very different, much cleaner than I was younger. It was dark and stinky. But now, as you see, it's with the fancy residential buildings around. But I also like that period, the rainy season in Shanghai. It's just so romantic, and you forget about how sterile the city is. How you forget about the cynicalness of the city, and you start thinking about all those romantic things, those old, 1930s movies in Shanghai. So this is the only cityscape I liked about Shanghai. And the really younger generation, like this girl who's only 10 years old, probably my least favorite generation in China because they're very spoiled. They're born in the society that you have everything. And but I really fond of this girl because she had that purity. She doesn't seem too materialistic. In fact, she reminds me a Chinese girl. Those posters in the 60s in the Chinese propaganda poster. Very serene in a way, very kind. And the hairstyle, the T-shirt is all kind of reminded me of that era in China. So the whole project is based on my personal memory in a way, how I remember China when I grow up, those little things, and whenever I see them in a different city when I was traveling, that would be the object I would be most interested. Like this tutu card. In most Asia you call it tutu, but in China there's many different words for it. I have been writing these cards all my life, but I never really look at them. I don't know. I don't really know what they look like. So this is Chengdu, and I was having a tea in a tea shop, and I saw this tutu park in the parking lot, and I started to look at it, and fascinated about the structure of it. This is one thing I have to say is how modern art and the classical Western art really influenced me on my photography. I moved to U.S. in 2000 without knowing who is Andy Warhol, and I have no idea what the modern art is. The first time I go to the Walker Art Center, I saw this huge painting of Mao by Andy Warhol. I was in the state of shock because I just don't know why anyone would do that. I mean, in the museum setting, I completely don't understand. Then I saw a sculpture by Donald Judd. I completely lost. I don't know what this is. I don't know what this means. And also classical art, which I knew before I come to United States. I studied a little bit about Picasso and Van Gogh, all those masters, but always see them through those little textbook picture. And the first time I standing in front of a Vermeer at a Met, I nearly break down because it was emotional moment. That's something you're always influenced by. Impact you a lot, but you never really see the real thing. So all of them kind of, in a way, formed who I am as a photographer, doing this work. And in fact, when I look at this card, I was thinking about Donald Judd. I'm thinking about the pink square sculpture and how what the person was constructing this card, he probably had no idea what Donald Judd is, but he's making this beautiful, very carefully composed object, which for many years I just didn't care. So this is another element. I'm looking for things so obviously always around me, but I never really cared when I lived in China. But now I lived in the U.S. for many years. All those things starting to sneak into my memories. When I see them again, they become such a phenomenal, emotional impact in me. Another Donald Judd influenced sculpture, I would say. This is one of the pictures about housing projects in China. I don't know whether it was the immigration of the neighborhoods, and you can actually see the shape of the roof, and that must be. I think that's a bathroom wall, where that little square you put the shampoo stuff. So it was fascinating because you see how where the ground is, so you can even imagine, you walk up and go to the bathroom there. But now it's outside. I actually live in the shanty house like this, so it reminds me a lot about this neighborhood, this kind of neighborhood. Also, it's very significant for me because I don't have any picture of my old neighborhood. I think I'm I lived in a shanty house until a shanty town until when I was 18. So I think that kind of shanty town lifestyle really formed who I am. I learned everything there. But the living condition was not good, and I think that became something I complained about all my life, all my early life. So when the shantytown being demolished, everybody was so happy they can leave the town, and they didn't. Nobody seems made a documentation of it. I didn't have any picture of my old house, so every time I look at this picture, I can imagine my own house. This is actually in 2009 when I finally convinced someone to be nude. And this is very much like my almost naked portraits, very clean background. But they're different because the almost naked portraits are much straightforward. They always look at me. They're trying to tell me things. And we have this very intimate communication. But that's not the case in China because this is photographed in Shanghai, but this person is actually from a very small town in China. It was very hard to communicate with him because he constantly thinking about why you want to photograph me, why you. But that moment was great. I stayed in a hotel where I invited him over, and I said, "What do you want to drink?" And he said, "Orange juice." It was that time I was thinking orange juice because that's such an American thing. In China, we don't drink orange juice. Even now, maybe, but when I grew up, we drink teas and watermelon juice, everything. Nothing, we eat orange, but we never drink orange juice. And I was thinking, this guy from this tiny small town, living in Shanghai, he actually adopted the Western lifestyle of drinking orange juice. So as he was drinking orange juice, I snapped this picture. As I said, I was very much inspired by minimalistic work. I didn't understand the first time I saw Jasper Jones or Donald Judd, and slowly I started to understand and look at detail, look at simple things, and that's what this picture is about. This is in Xi'an. I would just look at the shape, the triangle shape, that water come out of that little pipe, and looking at nothing. And I think that's something very personal about me, is I like to look at things that you don't know what you look at. And the smoke, mist is one of them. I often look at picture like this and I'm wondering what's the other side, or what's inside this mist, and what feel like you're in it. And this is, I was so close to the fountain. I actually feel the water drips land on me when I was taking picture, and I was thinking, well, I wanted people to experience that kind of refreshingness, that you so close something, you don't know what's in it, you cannot go in, but you get a little sprinkle of it. My first trip to China was also an exploration. This is from my first trip in China. I did not really know what I want to photograph. As I said, I want to photograph a real reality, a real Chinese life, but I didn't know what that is. so I started to go to those what we call third-tier cities. This is Guiyang, which is a very small, the capital city of a very poor province. And I didn't have the concept of photograph things that's very small, very detailed. So I actually photograph just everything I see. This is one of the moments I really liked, where this mysterious pedal boat looks like nobody's in it, but I think there's someone in it. And above it, you see this European-looking sign, and the people are gathering together, gambling, I believe. So that is a kind of a moment I remembered as a child in Shanghai. You probably don't see that period in a big city, any big city in China, but in a not overly developed city, you kind of still find that kind of very real life moments. Talking about looking at nothing again. This is a friend of mine, actually. I was fascinated looking at her hair. Just the lighting didn't. If you look at the prints, you can see a different kind of color in it, shape. It looks like a sculpture to me. And I unsuccessfully convinced her to get naked. I would say my goal is not get people naked. My goal is to make people feel comfortable about me. But I think one of the ways you do it is you try to gain trust from the person through talking. But I think with a friend, that part is very hard to go past. I almost never photograph a friend when I was doing Almost Naked in the U.S. As I said, I like taking a portrait, start this blankness, but as a friend knowing everything about me. So, but I love this picture because it's almost looked like a picture of a sculpture. This is a very typical moment in a small town in China. Initially, I actually saw this person. The reason I photographed is this person is brush teeth by the pond. And I was kind of fascinated someone would do that. But then I started looking at the whole scene, and I seen everybody in its own mood, its own life. I think my work, in a way, I'm a huge fan of Gary Winogrand, and just look at his picture of the zoo and the streets. You always see people passing by each other, but they're in their own world and they're doing their own thing. This is one of the picture I think reminds me of those Winogrand picture. I love this. I love this scene. Is you can see so many different little stories in it. One thing I started to look at is Chinese brush painting. I studied art in China, but I never really interested in Chinese painting, those long scroll painting, where you see pictures of yellow mountains with tiny little people in it. When I was passing by this scene, this is in Qingdao, a beach city in northern China, I saw this tree, which is a typical tree in the Chinese brush painting. And then I saw the mountains, not mountain, but rocks. And I was literally waiting there to have someone get on it. I think I waited at least 2 hours. I sit on a bench, just waiting. A lot of people go by, a lot of groups, a lot of kids, and finally this one guy get on the top of the rock, and I shouted at him. So he looked back to me. So I took a full picture. He was by himself. He had no idea what I want to do, but again, this is one of my friends. I decided to photograph during the vacation. I was again, I want to show most of my portraits in China are younger generation, at least my age or younger. I always think people in my generation who born in the 70s are the luckiest generation in China because we know everything about China. We went through at least modern China because we born when Cultural Revolution just finished. So we still feel that atmosphere. And then we went through every single change in China until today. And I don't think any generation had that much change in their life. You know, I see Shanghai, the other side of Shanghai, the Pudong part of Shanghai, from nothing, rice field, to today, this gigantic city. How many people can see that or live through that? So this girl, one of my best friends, and I was looking at her as we finished swimming, and I particularly looked at her dress, a swimsuit. I was thinking, I was kind of shocked a Chinese girl dressed like that, to be honest. And I loved the color coordination, everything, from the fruit to the bracelets, to the, bracelets? Mm-hmm. Yeah, to the dress, the swimsuit, lipstick, everything. It's the single color. And the way she spit the pits is so Chinese. This is actually also one of the small town in China. Actually quite touristy town. I think Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon would have a scene shot in that particular area, actually. So I went over there. I tried to avoid touristy area, actually, but I always want to see this town. So I went, and I didn't want to take a picture there because for a few days I didn't want to because it's too beautiful, too iconic. It's just this Chinese beautiful water town landscape. But one morning I wake up, I saw these students lying by the river, by the pond, and drawing, and I just thought they completely transformed that landscape to a different story. There's one photographer, if you notice here.
What is it called, this town?
It's called Hong Village, Hongchun, that's what it's called. Mm-hmm. This is photographed in Shanghai. Also, one of my favorite things about Shanghai is you see this European-inspired decoration, architecture-wise. You see the gate and the fence is all kind of European-influenced. But then outside that kind of a luxury compound, you start seeing the real life, seeing the real Chinese life, where towels from the bathhouse is hanging around, and also a sculpture for me. This was photographed in a university. I don't know. I invited this two university couple, and we decided to photograph this school classroom. I asked them to be more intimate because they're lovers. Really try to push the boundary of how intimacy Chinese younger generation can be, and that's how far they can go. In the public, I mean. This is my grandma's apartment. She is my hero in a way that she went through a very tough time during the Cultural Revolution, also afterwards too. This particular table, she kept it for I don't know how many years, must be 50 years or longer. Very neatly taped glass. She almost changed every furniture in her bedroom, but that table must remind her a lot of history of her family. And you can see there's my sister's picture in the middle of the table. All the grandsons, grandchildren's. I wasn't in it. I'm not in this table, I think. But when I go to China, I do random trip. I never really think about what city I want to go. I don't plan out. I literally just look at a map, see where I have not been to yet, and then normally pick a small city. This is a couple. This picture actually come. I have to say I really discovered this picture because I vividly remember the photo shoot. I thought it was a very boring photo shoot, but when we were editing the book, when I was trying to go through all my portraits, this picture just came across to me, and I looked at it again. I just found, I still think it's a plain picture, but somehow his gaze is so mysterious and both mysterious and inviting, in a way. Something about him is boring, but kind. And I also love that smoke, that guy smoking behind him. I like that. Again, I think I like to play that kind of connection between two people in my portraits. This is also inspired by the Chinese paintings, where you see a lot of cave paintings in the traditional Chinese brush painting. And I'm a huge fan of caves. I'm actually afraid of dark, but something about mysterious things I always want to go in. I go through this cave at least 5 times. Nothing is inside, but I like that mysterious entrance. It's so inviting, and that little stream of light. Sometimes I really think about the placement of things, and for such a simple light placed there that way, I just found it so unintentionally beautiful. If you hire some designer to do it, they will never do it this way. As you see, a lot of caves in China, especially in the tourist side, you see all those beautiful lighting inside that completely ruin the whole cave. But in this case, it's just unbelievably stunning to look at. This young man I met also in the university. I was fascinated. I was walking behind him and saw the 10 lines. I was just fascinated of those 10 lines. But when he turned back, I saw the skin condition. And in my brain, I already constructed a picture for him. So I invited him to my hotel. And it takes, in a way, I think a man is harder to convince than a woman. I think they have, they're very much, even both in China and the United States, I think they hard to gain trust from a male model. I don't know. That's just my experience. This is a very interesting picture. within Xi'an, I went to a noodle shop to order noodles and to go. And unexpectedly, he gave me this plastic bag with my noodle in it. And that was, I grew up in Shanghai, so I think I never really experienced that in Shanghai. In the big city, maybe they don't do that. They give you a little plastic ball or something, but I don't know what to do with this noodle because I obviously don't know how to eat it. And I placed on my windowsill for quite a while until I look at it again, I discover how beautiful it is. The color and the chopstick, the way I put it. So I took a picture instead. I did open it up and try to eat it. So it's delicious. This is a typical Shanghai woman, I would say. I would say very vintage looking 1930s Shanghai woman. We just look like that. A friend of mine too. That's something really remind my childhood in the shanty town. We don't have lollipops, so all we have is this sugar thing on the stick. Outside the elementary school, every day I get off school, and I saw this vendor, and I buy this candy. I have not had this for ages, and I saw that in Chongqing. Interestingly, from very long distance, it's very small, it's like this big, but from very long distance, I notice it. It's something just attract me. Some elements, like I said, things I never pay attention to, but as the time goes by, it becomes such a great memory. When you see them, when it's there, you instantly just attract to them. I also surprised to see kind of unexpected Western elements. In this case, you see this huge garbage bag, but with this kind of American motorcycle print on it. This is my nephew. In the same room, I photographed my grandma's table. He not only looked like me, but he does everything like me when I was younger. And I always, every time I see this picture, I imagine 20 years ago, I probably sit there myself too and look at it, nothing, and visualize my future, maybe. I don't know what he's thinking. He's probably thinking about a video game. This is my mother's gift to give away to someone. She packed herself, actually, so you can see a lot of used stuff, and the ribbons used, and the boxes probably used. She does that all her life. She packs her own gifts in a very shabby way, I think, but she always thought everybody loves it. This is the cover of the book. I really love this book. This is one of the last portraits I made in China. This is really something echoes the title, Chinese Sentiment. The whole book is, the whole project is almost like a dream. I'm going back to look for this Chinese dream that it's kind of just lost nowhere. And very sculptural looking bird cage, pigeon cage. And I loved it when you see our building is almost the same. She's the only brave Chinese girl had undressed for me. And I absolutely admire her. She came up to me, she said, I would like to pose nude for you. Mm-hmm. And I tried to ask her multiple times, are you sure, are you sure? She said yes. she said, I think she just want to be in the art. I think that's her dream. And interesting story, this picture was published in the Chinese Life magazine. And when I got the magazine, they actually retouched her nipple off. I think that's the line. This picture is, of course, very ironic and very funny. This is a state-owned organization for culture, I think. I don't know how to translate that. But just to seeing this gold gate is China has passed that imperial time long time ago, but you still see this gate that almost look like a Versailles or something. I just thought it was absolutely ironic. This is also one of very few cityscape I make. I make it because one reason it's in the fog. Another reason is it reminds me a necklace. It's almost a necklace for a city. Something really sentimental to me to think about it. I love humor in the city, intentional humor. In this case, I thought I was looking at ninjas, stick there. Also, it's so beautiful that you can see the craftsman of those wrapping. It's so carefully. Those are trees, if you don't know. It's very sculptural for me. This is also a very personal picture. This is actually my persimmon tree. As you can see, it's almost died. I don't know when I had this tree, but my mother keep telling me that's your tree. And I said, well, obviously you don't take care of it. But she kept the whole thing. And it was she said it's always a memory for her about me because I'm never home, and it's outside my window. It's such a Chinese painting-like tree. One of the plants I really fascinated in China is bamboo. I study a little bit painting in China as a young, but the only thing I want to paint is bamboo. So when I saw that bamboo forest, I was over the moon. And when I look through the bamboo forest, I'm seeing this maze behind it, it's abandoned maze. And this girl, it's just an amazing moment. I don't know, I just can't miss it. And she's looking at something on the wall, thinking. She's lost herself, but she also lost in the environment, I guess. One of the traditional thing in China we do is this Chinese medicine cupping method. And I actually had the idea to photograph Chinese cupping. I just love that graphic. I think every time someone did a Chinese cupping, the doctor actually made artwork on their back. So I convinced my friend to go get a Chinese cupping so I can make this picture. This is in Chongqing where people play mahjong. I don't want to make a cliche image of China, but there's certain elements like the cupping, like the mahjong. I think it's so important in the average people's life because everyone seems doing it, and I just thought I have to be including those elements in the project. This is in Beijing, in the very old house where rarely I see people still, maintain their old tradition of a quilt. This is I think this is the last picture. Yeah, this is the last picture, but this is also the last picture of the book. Earlier we were talking about my book. The book started with the picture of Yangtze River, very blank, simple picture, and then we ended this picture ticket booth to go above the Yangtze River. So that's all. That's my. Thank you. I think when you show a model some picture of your early work, you planted an idea in their mind. I like the idea you go into somebody's apartment, just started fresh, and you have this, I love that anxiety that we don't know each other, but we really try hard to know each other. That process is amazing. I actually always thinking myself enjoy more of the process of making an image than making the image. So I don't. I mean, it's several occasions I do when someone I'm really interested and they just have to see your early work to model for you. Then I just show a few images. Like that particular picture, I thought it was boring, but 2 years later, I look at it again, something new. I see something new. I think it's a matter of at the moment when you make that picture, because I know everything about making this image. And if the chemistry is not good, and for my part, I would think that's a successful picture. But I think when time goes by, that part starting to fade. And I think I really look back those pictures in a very refreshing eye. I look at them like an outsider almost. So then that make me rediscover things that I may not see earlier. I'm going to China after many years living in the United States. Everything seems exciting. So I actually photograph everything for the very first trip. But even after coming back to China for the first trip, I still think they're exciting. But after the 10th trip, then I look back at my first trip picture. I think, wow, how many, cliche pictures I was making, because my understanding of China has been gradually changed. Yes, all the time. The Chinese sentiment book is not for other people. It's not a travel book. It's not a travel book to tell someone where you go, where you to see. The Chinese sentiment book is my personal journey. It's my diary. For 2 years, I go to China to looking for things. It is like the cover. It's almost like a dream. You just dream through this whole trip. So for me, it's always going to be something very meaningful. Hopefully that's also, I provided something really interesting for the audience to look at. Every picture I made, every project I made, the process of my reconnect to my inner sensitivity, it's probably more important than making those images. I do believe that's an important part of being an artist too, to not overly thinking about what to make physically, but to thinking about that process of making the art. So I randomly shoot pictures all the time, especially in China, because I don't really know. I know what I want, but I don't know where they are. So I'm actually looking for them, looking for the elements I will be interested. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm looking for. But when I see them, I know that's something I would like to shoot. But some elements I do think about. I want to find them, like the cupping picture and the mahjong, because they're so important, I think, in my life too, and in other people's life in China. And it's almost a symbol, of China. So I wanted to find those. I have an intention to find those images. The editing process is, it'd be my own editing, not the book editing? No, your own. My own editing. My own editing changes all the time. Every time I have new pictures, or every time I look back at my old contact sheets, I change my edit. So they're not staying the same way all the time. You know, next time I talk, this will be completely different order. The image, editing Chinese sentiment is actually very easy for me, because there's the pictures are kind of random. They're not specific subject. You know, it's not 20 pictures of the same thing. They're so random, so they can easily go flow anyway, really. But I think also depend on my mood. Sometimes I'm more interested in thinking about me, so it will be different way. Sometimes I'm more thinking about China, I think about home, it will be the other way. So it changes all the time. My goal is to have them forget about the camera. You know, not only for Chinese pictures, also for the almost naked portraits. For the most time, I don't even take my camera out. After maybe 30 minutes of talking, I think I don't pose myself as a photographer in a way. I almost thinking about I am more like a psychologist with a camera. You know, you talk to them, make them feel good about our relationship, and put them at ease, and maybe they will gain some trust back towards me. So that's when I think I started to photograph them. I don't really explain much. I simply say I'm a photographer, and I would like to make a portrait of you. And yes, I mean, many people are surprised why anyone want to photograph me, but I think that's also the great part of it, that if anyone's interested in you, I think you'll be happy about it, right? I don't have a absolute concrete answer for whether the transition is intentional or not. I think I don't think about that when I do the work, because 10 years, well, not 10 years ago, in 2004, I started Almost Naked. I don't know I will have the Chinese sentiment work. I did not know I will have the self-portrait work. So those things that come later. Those projects happen because I did my Almost Naked work. So it's, in a way, it's unintentional. But I will have to not disagree, I have to tell you that the Almost Naked work is not about looking at other people. The huge part of it is looking at myself. You know, it's me taking the picture. You know, I made a decision on who I'm going to photograph, what way, and what kind of communication I want. So I think they say a lot about me, probably more me than the subject, I think.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
To Shen Wei.